Imagine a world with no cold calling. A world where companies don't sell your data to other companies who want to pester you. At G4 Claims, we don't cold call and we don't buy a single lead from data companies. Oh, and if you're due any compensation from your car accident, you pay nothing to us at all. For full accident management support, including motor replacement, repairs and personal injury compensation claims, just search G4 Claims today. For help the way you want it.
Hi and welcome to this week's episode of the DW podcast. I am joined by Craig Telfer, football journalist, host of A View from the Terrace on BBC Scotland. How are you doing?
I'm great, Derek. Thank you very much for asking me onto the show. Really appreciate it.
No worries. I was, for those that are watching or listening, we're actually recording this on a Saturday morning, so I was watching you last night as we were exchanging emails, and I thought, you know what? The show's going from strength to strength, isn't it?
I was good. I thought that when we finished the recording on Wednesday, I had a good feeling about the show because there was lots of funny moments in it, some really good bits in the studio. You know, when you're with the guys and you're filming, you know that the bits that are going to work particularly well. And I think last night had my all-time favourite section of the show, and that's where Danny Lennon, the Clyde manager, and who... just a brilliant, funny guy, very unique look at football, and he's a bit of a cult figure with what he's done in the League Cup with Wraith Rovers and scoring at the Olympic Stadium against Bayern Munich and winning the Cup with St Mirren. And it was brilliant to get to talk to him. And we must have spoken with him for about an hour when we were filming, and only like about 12 minutes made it into the actual show. So there's loads of stuff they had to cut out, but that was good, and it seems to have been well received. So I'm pleased where the show's been going. We always try, certainly myself, it's great to hear people like you say that you enjoyed the show. I always think, well, that's great, but that means the next one's got to be even better. So it's always just trying to every episode to be better than the last one, and that's something that everyone, right from us in front of the camera to the guys behind the scenes, are all pushing each other to try and do.
You know, I love it. I'm a big fan of You for the Terrace, and I've got a lot of friends that are Motherwell fans and say similar, but I feel that it's almost, for me, I like it because it's not that old firm driven. You know, it's you're looking at the lower leagues, and I've heard people often say, you know what, they know so much about Scottish football, they're Scottish football geeks, you know, how can they know all this? It's like, and I think it's refreshing, to be honest, Craig.
People have said that. I think that obviously Rangers and Celtic, the two biggest supported teams in the country, and there's loads of places. If you're a Rangers and Celtic fan and you want to hear exclusively about your club, amazing. There's so many places you can hear. You mean even before you come onto the mainstream media, there's so many fan podcasts, so many fan websites, and then you look at, say, like The Record or The Sun or like Super Scoreboard, places that are more or less specifically designed for Rangers and Celtic fans, and that's fine, but there's so many good stories. There's another 40 clubs in the SPFL, and that's even before you go into the Lowland League and the Highland League. So many great stories in there, and I think that's something that we've tried to do, is to celebrate all the daftness, all the ridiculousness, all the, you know, Scottish football is such a unique sport. Yeah, it's very difficult to try and explain why it's so unique, but you know yourself, Derek, from watching it and watching Motherwell, and you're following a team who probably that you're never going to win a league. Probably, well, maybe apart from this season, probably too good to get relegated. Best chance you've got is win. You know, I think it's a country where, other than the two teams, success is very limited, but it doesn't make it any less passionate. And I think that was for us. It's all about finding the news stories where stuff is. So if Cowdenbeath have done something really interesting at the weekend, if Brecon or Annan or Falkirk or Motherwell have done something interesting at the weekend, you talk about that. Likewise, if Rangers do something interesting at the weekend, or Celtic do something, or Hibs or Hearts, then you talk about it. We're not driven by the clubs, we are driven by the stories. And lucky for us, we've got 42 teams. Well, prior to the shutdown, there was 40 teams to talk about, but that's it, just finding the stories, and it's not all just about the two teams.
You'll think I'm having a go at you here, but I'm certainly not. The bits that I enjoy are the bits where you guys aren't on the screen as well. You know, I think
that's the bits I enjoy the most as well, man. So don't
get me wrong, you do a cracking job, but you know, I think you do a really, really good job at capturing the stories away from the pitch.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a chat with Daniel Lambert, who's the chief executive of Bohemians over in Ireland, and he's coming on the podcast in a couple of weeks for those that are regular listeners. But we spoke about, especially in Scotland and also in the League of Ireland, look, you're never ever going to compete with the Premiership. You're never going to compete with La Liga or the Bundesliga. But as you says, there's these 42 clubs, and what they've got is they've got stories away from the pitch where they're really ingrained in their community. There's clubs that have been there for over a century and more. And the work that they do, it's some of the things that you've captured, I think, have been absolutely brilliant. It's the programme collectors, the guys that are collecting the stickers. It's, the person that goes and cuts the grass, or the person that goes in the mascot suit. It's really different, and that's what makes these clubs special.
I think you're absolutely right there. I think you're absolutely right. Where it's good to to be part of the studio sections, and that's great fun. I mean, like, good friends with the guys, and so it's good to hang about with them and chat about football. But I think that's something that the show does very well. That's something that we're not really involved in as presenters. So a lot of credit has to go to Andy Mass, who's the producer, and Jordan Laird, the director. Incredibly talented guys, incredibly creative guys. And I remember Jordan explaining the thinking behind it, and it's always start with a question. So, for instance, a couple of weeks ago, we looked at the Montrose groundsman, did a profile of the Montrose groundsman, which was brilliant. It came across as such a nice guy. And it was the question was, what does a groundsman do when there's no football? Let's go to Montrose and find out. So it's all just about asking the questions and then trying to answer them through these videos. So one of the most celebrated VTs that we've done in Review for the Terrace is with Terrace. The sort of is it the Outer Hebrides? Certainly fucking miles away in the middle of nowhere, this island. And it was the idea of, like, what's the most remote away day in Scottish football? So to start with that question, I went over to Terrace for a weekend to film, and the footage that they got from that was just stunning, absolutely stunning. I remember we have prior to the coronavirus pandemic, we would meet through in Leith at the Studio Something, that's production company, at the Studio Something offices, and I got there about 20 minutes before everyone else, and I was asked in, and they were cutting this video, and the wee look at the stuff they were filming, and you're just like, my goodness, this is beautiful, like drone shots of like these guys playing on a pitch, a pony, pack of wild ponies running past as this game's taking place, and it's incredible, and they do so well at capturing, as you say, man, the richness, the stories, the people, and it's not just all about the game on the Saturday and the 90 minutes and the players on the pitch and the managers. Football means so much to so many different people, and there's so many different ways that people in the communities feed into it, if you know what I mean. And that's something that's delighted to see that the guys who do the VTs, hugely talented guys, and I do think they capture that really well.
I think what comes across as well, away from the VTs, is, you says that you love being around the guys and you are friends and you enjoy it, and you can see that, you can see that the boys have done the podcast before this, have known each other in the build up to the TV show, because I think sometimes you can watch things, for example, I'll not compare you to something like Match of the Day or, all these usual football panel shows, whereas it's pundits that have been chucked together, and sometimes they might click, sometimes they might not, but the joy is seeping out of you when you're recording it. You can see you trying to hide the wee laughs and jokes and actually rein yourself in slightly because you're having so much fun.
Aye, it's been, I'd say, have to be professional. You're there fundamentally, you're there to work. You're there to make a TV show, and that's first and foremost. Just in case Andy Mass is listening, and I sound like I'm total goofing off, but no, you're there to first and foremost to make a TV show. But it's the fact is that we're very, very lucky to have had the opportunity to do this with guys that you've been friends with for a number of years. That you know how each other click, you know how to wind each other up, you know the questions to ask each other. We know whose certain personalities are good for certain things. So, for instance, in last night's show, we did a preview for the League Cup, talking about who's going to win between St Johnstone and Livingston. And we knew that Fowler and Joel are really, really good at talking about something, getting passionate about it, and then getting myself and Sean to chip in with questions and maybe like needle them a wee bit to draw out different answers. So it's that chemistry is there, and that's certainly something we play up with. I remember when the show first started back, so it'll be nearly 2 years since first episode was first broadcast. but people said they don't look very natural. And I remember at the time thinking, I don't know about that. It feels natural to me because I'm hanging out with my friends. But now that we're further down the line and we've got a far better idea of what it is we're doing, it's you go in there and you know exactly what buttons to press and how to wind people up. And that's certainly, I'd like to think that comes across. So I can understand people watching and just thinking, these guys are fannies. This just isn't for me. I don't like these guys. Don't like the way they're talking about football, and that's fair enough. It's like, I think if imagine you were at the pub and you were sitting across from a table for a bunch of guys who are being loud, and you're just like, fucking hell, I hate these guys. I want them out of the way. Or you could be thinking, these guys might be quite funny. It's just one of those things. But for me, getting to hang out with my mates and talk about football, it's a gift, man. Very, very fortunate.
It's important you say that as well, because not everybody will like what you do. And it's important to know that doesn't mean that you're not having a successful show. That doesn't mean that it's not good. It just means that you've got a different audience to a certain degree.
Man, it's like football is... Robert Borthwick and I had a conversation about this a couple of weeks ago. And if you're making a TV show in Scotland that's going to be about football or politics, it's going to be quite divisive. Like I don't go searching for the comments because they don't do you any good. If someone says it's shite, what are you getting from that? It's nothing constructive. You can't take that on board and think, not shite. That's it. We'll make the next show not shite. Then you can't do anything with that. So it's just for your own good. It's trying to stay away from them. And I think that sometimes, particularly like Rangers and Celtic supporters, don't take to the show as much because we take the piss out of Rangers and Celtic, but we take the piss out of Rangers and Celtic the same way we do out of Stenhousemuir or Annan or Brecon, like the same way we talk about Rangers and Celtic with the same respect as we give all other clubs. It's all about like a level playing field. The clubs get made fun of as much as they get talking up about. And I think that's something that we do quite well on the show is every team gets their place. It goes back to the same, what's the news story? What's the story? And giving everyone their place and their respect.
I'll ask you this, since you went on about slagging football clubs, is there any that haven't taken it too well?
Yeah, I haven't taken it too well. The guy, the admin from Alloa Athletic, the Twitter admin, I don't know if you've seen his stuff. Aye, that dug him out for being a bit chippy. He had actually posted on Pine Bovril, so it's common knowledge that he wanted to write a reply from the show, so he didn't take to that well. But not really. Most of the clubs, the further up you go, the clubs are difficult to deal with because they're big clubs, and them appearing on like regional BBC TV, it's for them. It might be a nice thing, but we can't. It's no big to us. You come further down though, the clubs are just brilliant to work with. Like for instance, Stenhousemuir, Montrose, Arbroath, Airdrie, Forfar, all been incredibly, Brecon City, like all these smaller clubs that have got, like, we mentioned earlier, like the community feel to it, they've been great. So anytime the guys have wanted to shoot a VT or go in and work in these clubs, could not be more helpful in terms of sorting out people, like making the space for them to come in, making sure they get access to the players and to the manager. So it's great. It really seems to have been embraced by, excuse me, the like some clubs in Scotland. But for other teams, like there was one in where we were making a VT. It was called Swapsies. It was like an Albion Rovers fan and a Celtic fan. So you've got the biggest club in the country against the most unfashionable. I mean, they don't even have a first name, like Albion and Rovers. The most unfashionable clubs in the country. And it was the idea that the Celtic fan would go to Clifton Hill and spend the day there, see what the fuss is about, and then the Albion Rovers fan would accompany her to Celtic Park and watch a game there. And they went to Clifton Hill, but they couldn't get permission. Celtic just didn't give them permission to film at Celtic Park. It was a bit disappointing, but like the way Celtic would probably see it is like, don't really need there's no skin off our back, whereas the smaller clubs further down are perhaps more likely to engage because it's a platform they might not necessarily have had before.
I think that poses a bigger question in Scottish football and Scottish football media to a certain extent, is that we don't do enough, in my opinion, to talk up the game, and to actually sell these stories that we harped on about earlier, in the community, and actually say, yeah, there's two teams that dominate the league, but there's so much more happening out here. And the fact that you get barriers like that in the Premier League in Scotland, for me, it just opens up a whole can of worms. It's like Anything that we can be doing to shout about our game, and and why we're proud about it, and why we've got the most attendance per head of capita across the whole of Europe, has to be positive. And clubs are just such a closed book. I sometimes feel if it's not them that's putting the content out there, they don't want anything to do with it. And
something, I think you might be right there. I think there are clubs that tell the story, that do it quite well. Like Celtic and Rangers have got good in-house teams. Like Motherwell's social media can sometimes be a wee bit live, laugh, love at times, but the stuff like inside Motherwell, the documentaries are very, very well put together, and I think they deserve a lot of credit for that. So if you're Motherwell, you'd be like, well, we're telling the story ourselves. I mean, not that Motherwell we've had any issues with Motherwell or anything like that, but do you know what I mean? And if the clubs might see, well, we're doing a good job of it ourselves, we don't necessarily need anyone to come and do it and maybe like put their own spin on it. We can do that. We can talk about Chris Long's time in the gym, or what? I just watched an episode a couple of days ago, and it was Chris Long talking about being in the gym. That sort of stuff. So I can see it. If the big clubs can control their own narrative, they will. Whereas the smaller clubs who don't necessarily have the resource to do it, they're more likely to embrace folk coming in and doing it for them. But you're right, it's a funny one, and there have been obstacles that we've encountered when trying to put the show on. And we never try to catch anyone out or do anyone wrong. We're just, like I say, trying to tell nice stories and have a bit of a laugh along the way. And you hope at some point that everyone can just like buy into that and just allow us to go in there and, as I say, make videos and tell stories.
You touched on something that I think's very prevalent, is that the clubs want to tell their own story. They don't want someone else doing it, and a lot of that, I think, and probably I don't think it's true. It's because they want to paint the players in their own light. They don't want external sources coming in and saying this player's disruptive or this player's that. You mentioned the Chris Long one at Motherwell, and they had a clip with Chris saying, everyone thinks I'm moody and my head's down all the time, but I'm really a positive guy. And for me, I watch Motherwell every week, and I'm probably talking out of tongue here, but that doesn't come across, So, and I get why the clubs are trying to do that. I think they've done a very, very good job at Motherwell, for example, with Tony Watt, where Tony's been at various clubs across Europe, across Scotland, and he's found it hard to settle. He'll probably never got off the back of that scoring 2 goals against Barcelona, and that'll always hang over him, which is not a bad thing to have hanging over you, to be fair. But they've done a very good job at painting him in. This is the real Tony Watt. He's such a nice guy. He helps out in the community. He's a hard-working football player, and he'll give you his all, and that's so true. But at the same time, I think the relationship between football clubs and media is so structured and so formal that sometimes you don't get the real person coming through. If you look at some of the interviews for the 80s and 90s, and players have just went off the back and done an interview with a journalist without the club even knowing about it, and they've told them the whole life story, and they've got some hilarious, things going out there. It's just like, that thing's missing now. Like, does it have to be so polished?
I can understand why you'd want it polished. You want to just stick to the message, and it's a bit of a cliche. You just want the players to focus on the football. I think that the higher up the food chain you go, the players are... It's quite difficult for players because there's more riding on them. They'll have more at stake, so they might not want to share certain personal aspects about their life. They don't want to share with journalists. They just want to talk about football. But then on top of that, you've got social media, which allows you to connect with players and fans. Players and fans can connect with each other in ways that you never had that. Christ, even 12 years ago, before the prevalence of Instagram and Twitter, you would never have had that. So I think it's, for a lot of them, it's all about, I think it's controlling the narrative would be the expression. And if you can put stuff out there on your own that is, as talk about Chris Long, a version of the truth, then that's fine. Whereas if someone else gets it, they can twist and maybe distort it, maybe not paint it necessarily in the light that you would want it to go. So I can see the way it is. I think that certainly what we've done anyway on A View for the Terrace is anytime we've had a guest in or anytime we've done a VT with someone is don't think anyone's come out badly from it. Everyone comes across well and everyone's got an interesting story, and it's all about sharing that story. From the guy they had last night, the chaplain at Queen of the South, to a few weeks ago we had Ryan Stevenson on talking about his tattoos. And I just think that's the sort of stuff. Not try and catch anyone out, but as I said, I can understand why clubs might be reticent to not to have access to their players or make sure the players stick to a certain message.
You've got your journalistic hat on here, Craig. You've been too diplomatic for me. I'm wanting you to hang them out to dry.
Well, you mean,
I'm only joking.
Well, no, but it's we did a section. I think it was last week. We did a section where you basically put players in court. You know, players that wind you up and annoy you. And one, we filmed 3 of them and only used 2. And one of them was Jason Cummings. Sean McGowan was talking about Jason Cummings. And I mean, if you think of Jason Cummings, what's the first thing that comes into your head? You think this guy's a gobshite, you know? Yeah, he's got the
Joker tattoo, isn't it?
His Joker tattoo. He's a gobshite that he tried to chuck a TV out a window when he was staying down in Peterborough. Someone who can be a pretty good striker, particularly at championship level, as he proved with Hibernian. But someone who is a bit of an arsehole, and perhaps that stops him from reaching his potential. And I'm sure he did an interview, might be with Marvin Bartley. I think Marvin Bartley was doing a thing on Instagram when he had
he's done one with Turnbull as well, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think he had Jason Cummings on, and Jason was like, I feel like anytime I join a club, the manager moves on. It's a new manager who doesn't fancy me. So now he's at Dundee. This is a real chance for him to show who he is. But one of the points he made was that people don't like people with personality. They just want all their strikers or their players just to, you know, give bland, boring interviews. And while I disagree with that, it's like you can give interviews where you show off your personality and have a bit of exuberance, but you need to back it up on the football pitch.
Yeah.
And that's if he's like, I mean, I've seen him play a couple of times, watched him Dundee versus Queen of the South last weekend. He scored, but it was a defensive mistake. He wasn't very good. And it's like, if you're not playing well, then fans can be like, that Cummings is a gobshite. You know, stuff like that. It's easy for that personality, that exuberance to be turned against you. And I think that's quite a sad thing, because I'm sure Jason Cummings is actually good value, and he is probably like a nice guy to hang around with. And I've no doubt he would give an interview that's 100 times better than most other people. But that exuberance and that confidence and that arrogance and that swagger, it can be used against you. So that's probably why players, when they get a camera stuck in front of them, they're just like, give the most boring, most obvious answers and then fuck off up the road, you know, so they don't have to do it anymore.
The Cummings one's a great point. I seen an interview that he done recently, and he was saying that, you know, people don't like players with characters in the game anymore, and he mentioned Gaza, and I think the other one was maybe Maradona or something, you know, and you're thinking,
it's like
the boys at the top of the game, you know.
It's like Paul Gascoigne was one of the most exciting players to play in Scotland over the last 30 years. Maradona's the best player of all time. Yeah. And then there's Jason Cummings sort of down there. So it's maybe I'd use different examples if I said Jason Cummings there.
I want to talk about your journey, Craig, because, you know, for me, the first time I came across you was on the BBC presenting this show, but, you know, you've put a lot of hard work in to get there, you know, and I think a lot of people don't know that. They just see you 4 or 5 boys pop up and think, oh, where did these guys come from?
I suppose I got into journalism. I know you introduced me as a journalist. I can't really call myself a journalist. So I'm just like a lucky jobber. That's how I describe myself. But I got involved. I went to Caledonia University to do a postgrad in journalism in 2011. And that really opened up the sort of avenues as to where you can take it. I always loved writing. And I thought that I did an undergrad at University of Glasgow in English literature, just because I thought, well, I like writing, so let's learn about books and poems and stuff and all that. But then I had the chance to go and do a postgrad in journalism, and that really gave you the opportunity to see, like not just from the aspect of being a written journalist, but video, radio, like how the internet is changing, and it's changed. I mean, that was back in 2010. It has changed so much since then. And at that point, you're encouraged to write. You're encouraged to keep on writing. And I started a blog about Stenhousemuir. I thought that's the thing I enjoy the most. I'm there most weeks, so I'll keep a blog and write it about Steny. And from that, sharing that on Twitter, that opened up yourself to new audiences, like people who aren't necessarily Stenhousemuir fans, but fans of clubs around that level who might be interested in reading more about what's going on at the Warriors. And I met a guy on Twitter called John Maxwell. John at the time was writing a blog called Ross County Tactics. And it is, as it says in the tin, it's a blog where he would analyse Ross County games and talk about them. And this was the time where Ross County went on that 40-game unbeaten run that took them from the first division up into the SPL it was at the time. And John and I had a discussion. I like John, being funny guy, good writing stuff, and so we follow each other and started discussing on Twitter. And it must have been about February 2012 we had the idea, like, why don't we start a website that focuses on the Scottish lower leagues from the first division down to the third division, and write about it and talk about it with in a mature way. I think a lot of the time when you see the lower leagues discussed in the broadsheets, it would be when Albion Rovers got a cup draw against Rangers. You know, like Brecon are playing Celtic and they'll go down and follow a Brecon player who's a plumber. You know, something the cliched stuff, the daft stuff like that. And we wouldn't say, no, let's go and write about these games and do it justice and interview players and so on. So weirdly enough, though, that was the time before Rangers went into administration and then had to start again in the third division. So for the division had never really had any attention. All of a sudden, it was getting the most attention it would ever get in its life. But we wanted to show that it's not just about who our Rangers are playing every week. You know, you'd had all these other great teams in the second division and first division to talk about. So John and I started that. We got we approached another couple of people to write with us. One of them was Sean McGuigan. And there was another guy, Alistair Gemlin. The four of us and a few other people like Craig Anderson, a few other people would all chip in, and we had the website going. And for I say it was success, and I mean success in the smallest term possible, because there's only for the best will in the world, you could write about Annan versus Clyde. The audience is going to be quite small for it. But the summer of 2013,
right, because it might be a small audience, but it's probably a large audience from that small catchment.
I think you're right, aye. And with that, so after the first year it had been going, we got approached by Craig Fowler and said, like, they had been on the Terrace. They were doing one show a week, and they were referring a lot to the stuff we'd written and telling me Pelly. And I think Fowler had the idea, do you want to come on the show? We're going to expand the podcast to one on a Monday and one on a Thursday, and then one on a Thursday talk about the lower leagues. So I was like, of course. That sounds amazing. I'd be delighted to get involved. And for that season, the 13-14 season, I would regularly travel pretty much every week through to Edinburgh to talk with Fowler and Joel, Tony Anderson, about it. And it was great. And it got a bit much, you know, to having like working through in Glasgow. You know, I ended up working for Caledonian University, where I'm still am just now in communications, but there, so I cut it down to sort of doing it once a month, and it was great being able to go on and just and something to look forward to go through to Edinburgh. And the Terrace ranks swelled up, and there was 14 of us involved, and it's great fun. But then fast forward, I'm sorry, this is quite a long story, but fast forward to 2018, and Fowler gets a DM from a guy at the BBC Scotland, for the BBC even, a guy called David Harron, that says, we're launching this new channel, BBC Scotland channel, and we're looking for a weekly hour-long show about Scottish football. Any chance you guys could see about developing the Terrace into a TV show? And Fowler we've got a WhatsApp group chat. Fowler puts in the group chat, and you think, fuck off, Fowler. Somebody's at it here. There's no chance. A bunch of slobs talking about Falkirk and Wraith Rovers and all that. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. But Fowler went and had a meeting with the guy, and sure enough, that he was interested. He'd listened to the podcast for a number of years and thought there was something in there that could be developed. And Robert Borthwick works for the company Studio Something, who are a creative agency that do like marketing, adverts, like a whole very, very talented guys. And it just so happened they were looking to try and make the steps to get into television. So Robert set up stuff between Fowler and the guys at Studio Something, Jordan, who Jordan Laird, the director that worked for them. And they were like, yeah, I think we could. So on, I think it was September 2018, we made the pilot through in Leith, and that's the best day of my professional life. It's so much fun pitching up the five of us and just this bespoke studio down in Leith, all this football memorabilia on the walls. There was like the Clyde wet tops.
Oh, I love them. They were on the show last night, actually.
The Scots footy cards guy. The Tartan Scotland top from Euro 96 with McCoy's 9 in the back. All these brilliant photos. It looked amazing. You're going in there and there's a camera set up and the sound guy, and none of us had done anything like this at all. So you're like, fucking hell, this is insane. Made the show.
Craig? Were you worried? Were you a bit? Or were you just like, nothing to lose here, let's just give it a bash?
A bit of both, Derek, a bit of both. Like, where it's like, never done anything like this. You've got one opportunity to do it, so you're really, look, but at the same time, you're hanging out with your mates. They all want the same thing as much as you. The guys behind the cameras are all great. Everyone's all pulling in the same direction. So we made the show, never thinking of it. Like, I think there was 4 other companies involved for it. Never thinking a million years we get picked. We actually had a premiere for it. Hired out the Dominion Theatre in Morningside in Edinburgh and watched the first episode, and it's like, this is great, but I'll never go anywhere. And then a couple of months later, Robert lets us know that we were the ones that have been selected for it, and it's bizarre. Like, never in a million years did think that we'd be doing on TV. You know, for something we just loved, you know, just as mates talking about football, to thinking that somebody thought there might be something in here. So it was like always a combination of like hard work, like, because everyone who's involved with the podcast works incredibly hard to make it as good as possible and to promote it and share it. But then luck as well. It wasn't as if we had a product like this. We made a TV show and then we're taking it out to people. It was the fact that David Harron at the BBC thought, there might be something in here, and then getting selected. So, you know the expression, you make your own luck.
I totally agree with that.
I think that's the case for A View for the Terrace.
Yeah, it's hard work there, but also luck, you know, and it's also that you had a track record of doing something successfully, you know, and people believed in your product. And do you know who you were up against in the pilot?
There was a couple of other companies. I'm not 100% sure. It wasn't something that's never really been discussed with us. But I'm not really that bothered, you know, because it turned out all right for us. But I do remember there was a podcast that David Harron was on. It was the Nutmeg podcast. Was talking about it, and he spoke about the shows. The 5 pilots that went in, and 4 of them, the 4 of them were all. He said they were all really, really good. And there was no doubt that they could have been adapted and turned into a successful show that could have ran for the weeks. But he said the 4 shows were here, and then A View for the Terrace was like out there a bit. So that's why they selected that one, because we did something like completely different. I mean, under the pilot, we ended up going into the main show, but we did, like, Big Duncan Mackay went to Wraith Rovers dressed up as the mascot, and the other VT was our Broth highlights filmed in the style of Wes Anderson.
Yeah.
And I'd never seen anything like that before, where it's this basically a game of football in the Scottish League One that is filmed in such a quirky and bespoke and beautiful style. And that was just something daft. You'd never seen stuff like that. So when David says 4 of the pilots were here, another one was out there, when you think back, you think, maybe that's where that comes from. And it also takes, you know, in the commissioner or in David, someone at the BBC, it takes a leap of faith, doesn't it? Because it's so comfortable to go away. Oh, this is the tried and tested. You know, here's a few guys talking about football on a couch, you know, and then they'll show you highlight reels or so. You know, to actually say that, you know, we're going to put a game of football on filmed like Wes Anderson. People will be like, shut there, you know. I know. I love that. I love that someone in there has thought, you know what, we're going to go with the guys, and it's worked. Because it could have been, you're absolutely right, it could have been easy enough for them to say, well, we like the idea, but we're going to replace the presenter. We're going to put Mikey Stewart in, you know, or you know, something like that. It's like, we like this idea where it's a bit more informal, but we want established names and faces. So it could have been easy enough for them to take the idea and then punt Fowler, me, Joel, Sean, and Robert off and get other people. Maybe, like, because like I said earlier, like, Jordan hadn't done any TV before. This is the first time he got into TV. he's never done it. Let's get a more established director and changed like the fabric of it. But for them to say, no, these guys haven't done anything, but we're going to stick with it. Like, I'll be forever in debt to like David Harron and that commissioning team at the BBC for taking a chance on us. I know we all will, but it's like, it must be like for so many things in life. If someone can just take a chance on you and then give you that opportunity to run, then it's great, and great things can happen. And I hope that we can always keep David and everyone who's believed in us keep those standards high.
One of my best friends, Martin, is an avid fan of the podcast and is a Patreon and has been for a long time. And when I told him I was speaking to yourself, he says, you'll need to ask Craig how he ended up presenting it. You know, why is it not Fowler? Because Fowler, he says, ask him if it's because of good looks.
Well, if it's because of good looks, then I think we both know the answer to that one. It's,
I think he was having a bit of a laugh, but hopefully Fowler doesn't take that too personally.
You know something? I've absolutely, it's something I've actually never asked him. In fact, I'll ask him next time I see him. When so it started off thinking this is a joke. Somebody's having you on, Fowler. To no, we're going to make this pilot. I remember talking to Sean about it at the time, and Sean and I thought that everyone else who's involved with the Terrace is like supports top flight teams. No, that's changed with Hearts and Dundee going down, but everyone supports top flight teams. So I thought they would talk about the top flight football, and then for 5 minutes each show, me and Sean would be wheeled out. Yeah. And be like, oh, Sean and Craig talk about Cowdenbeath, or something like that. We'd focus on it. But when we had a meeting, Fowler met the guys, some boys through in Edinburgh and some boys through in Glasgow, and I think what they did when they made the pilot was, I'm not going to say strongest hand because I don't think that's fair. I think that everyone involved with the Terrace is good, but I think they wanted someone like, you have to ask Phil, I suppose I'm perhaps the most, and I'm using this bunny ears, squeaky clean. You know,
wearing there.
Aye, that's my air quotes. I think it might have been one of the most squeaky clean. And so Fowler, I thought Fowler present it and we'd get wheeled on, but he said, no, you present it. Him and Joel have got like an encyclopedic knowledge of Scottish. Like Fowler's one season watched every single game in the Scottish top flight. Literally watched every single game in the Scottish top flight. Nearly broke him. Honestly, nearly broke him. How he managed it, I
enjoy that, Craig.
Oh man! Tell it to him. He's like, I think it was all right for about the first week, and then when he was realised like he's got his work and other stuff to catch up on, then he realised this is absolutely horrendous. And so it was Joel and Phil have got a brilliant knowledge of football, and Sean's just a lovely guy. You know, Sean, as you see him on the TV, that's exactly how he comes across. Just very knowledgeable, very funny guy. So they went with the four of us, and it's been a good decision. It's worked very well. I think that as we spoke about that chemistry earlier, it's got stronger and it's strengthened our bonds as friends, being able to present it. And again, very flattered to have been asked by Fowler to present it. And I'll always be grateful for that opportunity, because there's a number of guys that are involved in that podcast who are more than capable of presenting it. And it just so far happened that he asked me, and delighted with the decision.
Yeah, I might have read this wrong, Craig, because you come across to me like a massive football fan, and you certainly are knowledgeable as well. But did you get into Stenhousemuir when you were 17?
Yeah, that's right. Aye, that's right. Do you know, it's when Stenny, I would have been about 8 or 9. 8, it would have been when Stenhousemuir had that cup run, and when they beat Aberdeen, they beat St Johnstone, beat Aberdeen, and got to the quarterfinals of the Scottish Cup. And that was a red letter day for the town, that game against Aberdeen, because normally you've got crowds about like 500, 600 there, and then suddenly you've got Oakville View, a couple of thousand people there, which is incredible. And as a wee boy, seeing something that's happening 5 minutes from your front door, that's incredible, and that's something you want to be involved in. So it's very easy to get swept up in that, especially after beating Aberdeen, which was a huge result. Even at the time, as like an 8-year-old, you know this is absolutely incredible. But when you don't have those runs and you're watching the team playing like Meadowbank Thistle and Stirling Albion or whoever, it's like this isn't as interesting, and it's very easy to drift away. And like growing up, I mean, my dad used to play football. My dad's got 3 appearances for Queen of the South. Right. You know, so he's an ex-pro, he never really like took me along to games or anything like that. So it was more or less like to fall into it myself. And it wasn't until I was at high school, my mate gave me Championship Manager 99-2000. Played that and then got right into football. And I supported like Newcastle because I liked the strip, the grandfather collar, and Blackburn because they had that strip with the half and half.
I think we must be around about the same age, because that was, must have been the 90s or so. And I remember that was when the two of them were almost competing near the top of the English Premiership. And I had that Newcastle shirt as well. And it was the Shearer and Sutton up front.
And Philippe Albert and all that sort of stuff. But I liked Arsenal. I settled on Arsenal as my English team. But in terms of Scottish football, it wasn't until about to finish up my 6th year at school, like a mate that said, you should come along to Steny. And going along I remember Paul McGrillen, and obviously a Motherwell legend, and God rest his soul. Terrible what happened there, and a great player as well. Paul McGrillen, John Paul McBride, who I remember at one point they were saying he's going to be the new Paul McStay. Wonderful talent, just like issues off the park that stopped him. But going along there, seeing these guys and being in this stadium that's half full, old people shouting, horrible pitch, horrible football, pumped by, I think it was East Fife, watching it and thinking, this is terrible. Don't know how anyone could come to this. This is just a joke. But then I went the next week, and I don't know what happened in that following week, but it was all of a sudden, it was like, I am now a Stennismuir fan. Like, I love this. Cannot explain what happened, but it was just something happened that second week where it was just like all the pieces just all fell into place, and suddenly the team had been relegated by that point. I think it was against Alloa, that final game of the season. It was like, I cannot wait for the new season to start. Cannot wait. The 04-05 season ended up finishing like 6th or 7th or something, but went to certainly every home game. I worked nights, I worked evenings on a Saturday night at that point, but just couldn't wait for the games. All you thought about was going to the games, and it felt as though this is the sort of thing I should have been doing when I was like about 9 or 10. When your football's first forming. So I'm a bit of a late starter in that regard, but like, I love the club. I absolutely love the club, and I've been lucky enough to do colour commentary for their streaming service that they had since the season restarted, and I think that strengthened the bonds with the football team. Like going in there and seeing the staff and seeing the players and the manager and getting a chat with them, you feel how lucky you are to be part of that, and it really made me appreciate how much the football club means to me. And that's, the pandemic's been horrible, and I don't think there's much good that's come out of it, but that's probably one positive. It's like how much Steny means to me.
I love how you say it was that second game, where it all clicked into place, because there must be something subconsciously infectious about that first game, because if you went to a pub that was absolutely dire, and the pitch were flat and there was no atmosphere, and you're thinking, this is crap, you wouldn't go back next week.
I know.
There must have been something in that first week that thought, do you know what, I'll try it again.
I don't know what it was. Honestly, I'm looking back thinking I can't remember much about it. I can just, in my mind, I can just see the pitch, like the state of the pitch. It was like, when it gets to that stage of the season where it's absolutely done. It looks like a worn out old carpet, and the team losing. But then going next week, and that's all you wanted to do was go to the football. And you're young, and you're going to the pub, and you're drinking. You're at university at times, don't have any real responsibilities. Excuse me. It's just a great time in a young man's life. And the season, the 2005-2006 season, Stennismuir finished that campaign with their highest ever points total, 73 points, I think it was. Still wasn't enough to win the league. They ended up finishing third and getting knocked out of the playoffs by Berwick. And it's that season, I suppose, quite a Scottish thing to more focus on like the glorious failures than the successes. Yeah. Stennismuir are not a successful club, and the fact it was to see them come so close in that as well, that season is always something that's stuck with me. But the club being not a successful club, but they'll give you, that's what football does. It's the same, it's all relative. I suppose Motherwell are a much bigger club, but success has been like sporadic, it's fair to say. But I mean, you think for yourself, Derek, that your football club gives you the best days of your life.
Absolutely.
Some of the results, some of the performances, like the definitive banter years match when you beat Rangers in the playoffs. Like, to be a Motherwell fan across those two games must have been so much fun.
It sounds sad for people that don't watch football and don't go week in, week out, because they won't understand that. But that was arguably one of the best days of my life. You know, go to Ibrox on the Thursday night, 'cause it was the Thursday and the Sunday, going there on the Thursday night and winning, you know, scoring 3 goals at Ibrox when you usually go there and crumble. It's the feeling.
You're miles ahead of them though. Just the counter attacking, the pace. Was it the boy? Was it Lionel Ainsworth was playing? Yeah, he was just in a different class, and it was. You're absolutely right. I think, and in fact, it was Rangers as well, the team who were expected to just march back into march into the top flight, and then finishing behind Hibs and Hearts, and then like really making an arse of it across those 2 games, and Motherwell just looking so comfortable. It must have been great to see.
I better give it a plug here. Well, since you mentioned them, but we had Lionel on the podcast a couple of weeks ago. So if anyone wants to go back and check that out, he was talking about his goals at Ibrox and his other time at Motherwell. So that was he's a good guy as well, Craig, to be honest. But we've spoken a lot about football. I want to ask, because when I was talking to someone that you mentioned earlier on the podcast, Jordan, who put us in touch, his opening gambit was Craig is an enthusiast and an expert in everything pop culture. So what do you do away from football? What's your other pleasures and hobbies?
Other pleasures and hobbies. I watch terrible films. And that's something that I've got into bad habits. Like I live myself. So when I'm working working from home, I've got my TV just like where I'm staring just now. And so I don't think when you're working from home, you can't watch something good, because if you're going to watch something good, you're going to be drawn away from it, and you're not going to focus on the day-to-day work that you're getting paid for. So I like having something on. You have the
telly on during the day while you're working.
Yeah, man, I've just the volume's down quite low, and I've watched. I got Amazon Prime, and Amazon Prime, there is so much shite in there. There's a lot of good stuff in there, but there is so much shite, and it's very easy to find the shite. And I watched a TV movie called Stalked by My Doctor, and I watched the sequel, Stalked by My Doctor: The Return. And that's something I've spent a lot of time with. A lot of people say there's so many good things in the world, why not focus on them instead? And they're probably right, but it's sometimes easier just to focus on the shite. I like reading. I read good books though. No time for shite, but it's like reading good books. Play the electric guitar. I like playing video games. So nothing too necessarily outrageous, you know, that in terms I'm not like lion taming or like a trapeze artist or anything like that. All fairly ordinary hobbies, but there's enough with lockdown, you know, it's difficult. You do miss your friends, but there's enough like around the house to keep the mind ticking over.
I can't believe you watch telly when you're working from home. That would distract me too much. I can't multitask.
No, it's like only very rarely have I lost my attention. Like I started watching not long after we went into lockdown back in March. I started rewatching The Wire for about the 3rd time, and I will admit that yes, there were times I would end up watching The Wire rather than doing work, because The Wire is so good and it's so rich and it's so well written. But I mean, I'll be honest there, you can have Stalked by My Doctor on in the background, and you can look up from scene to scene, and you're not really going to miss much. Because if you imagine a movie called Stalked by My Doctor, and if you were to imagine how the film's structured and what happens in it, you're probably right. You're probably right. And there's no real secrets or twists or anything in Stalked by My Doctor.
I'm going to need to get this on Monday morning. Log into work. Stalked by My Doctor on the telly. Here we go.
It's honestly, it's decent fun, and Eric Roberts is in it, and he's always like a bit hammy, but it's fine, worth watching.
I have to say, you know, throughout this lockdown, my go-to, and it wasn't before, is game shows. I'm obsessed with The Chase, Beat the Chaser, Tipping Point, all this crap, and I'm just thinking, what am I doing in my life?
Like, listen, you know, it's. I think when the lockdown restrictions were first announced, I think people would have had great intentions, like brilliant. I'm going to start writing that novel I've been promising myself. I'm going to learn how to cook. I'm going to learn how to speak German. And you think, fuck, after doing a hard day's work and not really being able to get out of the house, sometimes you just want to sit on the couch and just watch shite and just let it sink into your eyes and out the back of your head. And there's nothing wrong with like quizzes and Stalked by My Doctor, you know, all that sort of stuff. There's no shame in that, and I'm sure there's people who have responded very well to the pandemic and have found themselves incredibly productive, and there'll be people that are just getting their head down and doing away and just can't wait for it that light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that by the sounds of you talking about The Chase and me talking about shite movies, I think you and I are both in a similar boat there.
Get us back to the football stadiums as soon as possible.
Can't wait.
What's the future looking like for Firstly, Craig Telfer, and also A View from the Terrace. What can we be expecting?
We take it like a block at a time. So we get commissioned for it was 20 episodes. So we got commissioned for when we came back from September to December, and then from January to I think it's the April. So it sounds boring. Take each game as it comes. Like I said earlier, Derek, it's just all about making sure that the next episode is better than the last, so that the people at the BBC can see everything going in an upward direction, and just making sure that fans are watching it, we're enjoying it, and it's still good, and it's still challenging, and it's entertaining, and it's funny. That's the most important thing. And if you said to me in like 5 years' time, like if A View for the Terrace is still going and I'm still like doing similar what I'm doing outside of that, I'd be delighted with that. It's never in a million years did think that one you get to chat with your mates about football on the telly. So you're very like, don't it sound like a Instagram motivational quote, but blessed, if you know what I mean.
Well, you could get a job with the Marlborough Media team.
So you take it like that, and if any opportunities come off the back of that, then brilliant. I've been again very lucky to have done some presenting for like the Scottish FA, the 2019 World Cup. Myself and Big Graham Thewlis did the Instagram Live and Facebook videos for that, which was great. And getting hang out with Thewlis, you probably know him.
Well, yeah.
Thewlis is just an absolute diamond, and we got basically the keys to Hampden. Could go anywhere apart from the changing rooms, and just like me and him just wandering around filming stuff, getting the pitch, and like this distance from Celtic when they were celebrating the cup win, it was amazing. And getting to do that, and I've done stuff for the hosting event for the Scottish Business Club, Scottish FA Business Club, where it's like hospitality. You get to down in the museum down in Hampden, where you'll get to interview a former player. So I've interviewed Kenny Miller to an audience, which was class, and him talking about playing for Scotland and all that, which is great. So if there's any opportunities that come off the back of it, then magic. But the main concern is just making sure that A View for the Terrace is still as good as it can possibly be.
That's brilliant. That's exciting, and it's good to see hard work paying off as well, Craig, and I wish you all the very best for the future.
Yes, thank you. It's hard work trying to balance like a full-time job and trying to do it, but it's worth it. When you watch the episode on a Friday night and you find yourself laughing along with it, then I think that's all worth it.
Every Friday to watch it.
Oh, I think the only episode I say I don't think I've missed an episode since it's been on. The only time I missed the first half hour because I'd been on a date with a lassie in Glasgow and I called it early so I could get back up the road and watch it. I missed the train by minutes. I had to wait for the next train, and then missed the half hour. But I think you watch it back and it's all just
romantic, Mr. Romantic. Oh, this class. I'm going up the road. Watch myself on the telly.
We didn't see each other again. We only went out the once. So I
wonder why.
But it's always just watching it back, to you're watching it as well to enjoy it, but you're also watching it with a critical eye and thinking, right, what can we do? What can we do to make it better? And for me, at the time being, that's the most important thing, is keep on working hard and try to make the show as good as it can possibly be.
It's funny that you mentioned, balancing it with a full-time job as well, and you touched on that earlier, working in communications. And I think when people view people on the television, they just think they're super famous. They must be making a fortune. What do you mean they've actually got another job? And I think, this is unfortunately a way that the creative industries have went to a certain extent. You've got people that are playing in touring bands, for example, all across Europe. And then when they come home, they're working as a labourer or they're doing something else for the rest of it. And I think people would probably watch yourself on the BBC and be shocked that you have to do another job as well.
It's just the way it is. I mean, we only work for like 1 day a week. There's guys like Andy, the producer, and Jordan. That's a full-time job is working. So Jordan balances the work of like directing A View for the Terrace, also directing the Studio Something company. Andy's got a young family on top of that, and he's training to do run 100k. So God only knows where Jordan Laird finds the time to do anything. You really got to say fair play to him. And for me, that just pitches up once a week, talks about Brecon and fucks off up the road. It's a bit different, but I'm lucky that I've got a sound boss. I'm using annual leave, so it's my time that I'm entitled to. But to block book all these Wednesdays off to go and film the show. You've got to have a sound boss. Could you just be like, turn and say, listen, it's not working for us. We need you in the office, as it would be. We need you in the office like 5 days a week. So very, very lucky with that. And let's say the universities are a really good place to work. And it's I've got the support of my boss and my team around me that all appreciate that this is something that I really, really enjoy doing. And they want to give me that support. You've
got his support just now, but if he watches this and knows that you're watching Stalked by My Doctor all day, then it might change.
Say, I had it on in the background. That's all I say. I had a Stalked by My Doctor on in the background.
Craig, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
No, cheers, man. That's a good way to kick off a Saturday morning, Derek. It was great to meet you, and it was great to talk about myself for the past hour. So thank you for the opportunity.
Not at all. Thanks to everyone who has watched or listened to this episode of the podcast. If you've enjoyed it, please like and subscribe and check out some previous episodes.